They thought killing one human would end the problem. They chose the wrong human. The strike came at 8:17 Geneva time. President Elias Ward was halfway through a speech about trade corridors and orbital tariffs, boring, necessary work, when the sky above the assembly complex turned white. Not bright. Not explosive. White. Like a god had opened an eye. The beam fell without sound. One moment there was stone, glass, flags snapping in the morning wind. The next there was a column of light so pure it erased shadow itself. The palette floor fused into molten slag. 300 delegates vanished between heartbeats. And the man who had welded Earth's bickering nations into a single, stubborn coalition became a scorch mark on live broadcast. They replayed it. Of course they did. The Dominion never wasted a spectacle. Within minutes, every screen on Earth carried the same image: smoke rising from Geneva, emergency sirens wailing, and the emblem of the United Nations half melted and falling into rubble. Then the alien ambassador appeared. Veilrun of the Dominion, tall, elegant, draped in ceremonial armor that shimmered like oil on water, looked into the camera with something resembling pity. "We regret the necessity," it said smoothly. "Your leader refused peaceful vassalage. We have removed the obstacle. Submit to Dominion authority, and further correction will not be required." Correction. That was the word. Like Ward had been a typo. For 6 long minutes, Earth said nothing. Markets froze. Fighter jets scrambled. Old veterans stared at screens in silence that felt older than language. In a farmhouse outside Tulsa, a retired artillery sergeant named Thomas Grady set down his coffee and muttered, "You just signed your own obituary, boys." Deep beneath the Colorado Rockies, in a bunker carved from stone older than humanity's oldest myths, the Joint Defense Council assembled. No shouting. No hysteria. Just quiet. Admiral Sofia Reyes stood at the head of the table. 62 years old. Hair iron gray. Eyes sharp enough to cut steel. Confirmed casualty. An intelligence officer swallowed. Biometric analysis confirms President Ward is deceased. The words settled like dust. A civilian advisor leaned forward. "We need to de-escalate. The Dominion fleet amasses ours 3-1. If we provoke them. They just vaporized our head of state on live global transmission." Reyes replied, voice flat. "This isn't provocation. This is war." She pressed her thumb against a biometric pad. "Activate Blackstorm." Half the room went still. "That protocol was never ratified," the advisor snapped. "It violates interstellar treaty frameworks and it violates their confidence," Reyes said. "That's the point. Blackstorm wasn't a missile. It wasn't a superweapon. It was patience weaponized. For 8 years, humanity had smiled and signed cooperation agreements with the Dominion. Joint navigation projects. Shared AI development. Supply chain partnerships for deep space expansion. Detroit factories had manufactured components for Dominion relay stations. Bangalore coders had optimized alien logistics software. Brazilian orbital yards had built hull sections for Dominion patrol craft. We were the helpful new species. Eager. Grateful. Quietly embedding ourselves into every digital artery the Empire possessed. Reyes turned to the operations chief. Phase 1. Across the solar system, dormant code awakened. On Dominion frigates orbiting Mars, micro-adjustments altered thruster calibration by a fraction of a percent. Harmless, until you plotted interplanetary transfers. On deep space relays near Saturn, encryption handshakes shifted routing priorities by degrees too small for immediate detection. In the Dominion flagship Imperious Dawn, currently positioned in high orbit above Earth, as a reminder of who held the bigger stick, navigation diagnostics blinked amber. Minor anomaly. The helmsman dismissed it. Down on Earth, Ward's body, what remained of it, was being recovered from molten stone. Crowds gathered in city squares. Not rioting. Watching. Grieving. Anger simmered, but it was cold anger. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that plans. At 11:42 Geneva time, the Imperious Dawn fired maneuvering thrusters to reposition directly above the equator, a calculated show of dominance. Instead of a smooth orbital shift, the flagship's trajectory drifted, just slightly, into a gravitational shear between Earth and Luna that human astrophysicists had mapped decades earlier. "Correct course," Veilrun ordered from the command dais. "We are attempting," the helmsman replied, tension creeping into its voice. "Navigation lattice reports conflicting vectors." On Earth, Admiral Reyes watched the telemetry feed. Phase 2. Within Dominion systems, human-authored subroutines, disguised as efficiency patches, began to argue with primary command layers. Thrusters fired against each other. Shield harmonics oscillated outside safe parameters. Still subtle. Still deniable. Until the Imperious Dawn's engines flared too hard while compensating for drift. Stress fractures spiderwebbed across its aft superstructure. "Engineering reports cascade failures," a Dominion officer shouted. "Core containment." The flagship shuddered. Reyes didn't smile. She just folded her hands. Phase 3. Hidden within coolant regulators manufactured in Ohio, approved by Dominion procurement officers who loved the cost savings, microcharges armed. Inside the Imperious Dawn's reactor assembly, something very small detonated. Then something bigger. From Earth's night side, civilians saw it first, a sudden blossom of fire against the stars. The Dominion flagship cracked open like an egg. Debris streaked across the atmosphere in a meteor shower that painted the sky gold and red. Across every occupied system in Dominion space, a hijacked broadcast overrode official channels. Instead of Earth burning in submission, viewers saw the Imperious Dawn tumbling helplessly, alarms wailing, officers scrambling in visible panic. Then Admiral Reyes appeared. Gray hair. Steady gaze. "You executed what you called a decapitation strike," she said calmly. "Allow us to clarify a human term." She paused. "Retribution." The feed cut as the flagship's reactor went critical. On Earth, silence broke, not with cheers, but with a low, collective exhale. The Dominion had meant to terrify. Instead, they had bled. But they still had fleets. Hundreds of warships scattered throughout the system. Carrier groups stationed beyond the asteroid belt. And now those fleets were angry. Within minutes of the flagship's destruction, Dominion vessels began powering weapons arrays. In the Rockies bunker, warning klaxons echoed. "They're charging plasma lances," operations reported. Reyes nodded once. "Deploy Wolfpack formations. Decentralize command. Let them chase ghosts." Human fleets didn't fight in neat lines. They fractured into autonomous battle groups, each captain granted authority to improvise. Across orbital space, the first salvos of interstellar war ignited. Plasma carved glowing scars across vacuum. Human railguns answered, hurling tungsten slugs at velocities that turned alien hulls inside out. In low orbit above South America, a Dominion cruiser tried to intimidate a human destroyer half its size. The destroyer rolled sideways, vented atmosphere to mask its thermal signature, and accelerated straight through a debris field like a bar fight with engines. "Target their sensor spines," the human captain ordered. "Blind them." A rail slug struck home. The cruiser's forward arrays imploded. The war had begun in earnest. And somewhere beyond Pluto's orbit, far from the public eye, a stealth command vessel drifted in darkness. Inside it, a tall, broad-shouldered man watched the battle feed without blinking. His name was Elias Ward. Alive. The Geneva strike had killed a decoy, genetically tailored, surgically perfected, placed deliberately in the public eye for months. Ward had insisted on the risk. "If they need a symbol," he had told Reyes during a classified briefing weeks earlier, "let's give them one they can't afford." Now he stood in silence as Dominion ships burned. "They thought they cut off the head," he murmured. An aide glanced at him. "Sir?" Ward's expression hardened. "We just showed them," he said softly, "that humanity grows new ones." The Dominion believed humans fought like they did, predictably, in neat formations, following orders without improvisation. They were wrong. Captain Mara Kincaid of the cruiser Resolute spat tobacco into a gravity cup and watched 3 Dominion destroyers close in from orbit. Odds? She asked, voice calm, eyes scanning tactical feeds. Bad? Her XO admitted, tension in his jaw. Good, Kincaid said, leaning back. I hate boredom. The first plasma lances slammed into the void. Space ignited like a forge. Kincaid rolled the Resolute, skimming debris from the Imperious Dawn as improvised cover. The human ship's shields flared against concentrated energy beams. The destroyers were bigger, faster, and armed with weaponry that had terrors written in their schematics. Return fire, she barked. Take out sensor clusters. Blind them. Human railguns thundered, slugs ripping through vacuum, spinning the lead destroyer into a tumbling wreck. The other 2 adjusted, but the humans had already fractured the engagement. The Dominion assumed fear would break morale. They counted on panic, on predictable panic, on humans surrendering once confronted with technology that could strip planets bare. They had miscalculated. Boarding pods launched from enemy hulls, dropping through shields and magnetic clamps. Kincaid's crew rushed to intercept. The corridors of the Resolute became a slaughterhouse. Plasma scorched steel, shotgun shells shredded armor, the stench of ozone and burning circuits thick in the air. The Dominion officers expected terrified civilians. They found miners from Ohio, ex-infantry from Nairobi, mercenaries, engineers, even an accountant who'd grown up on a farm with a rifle in his hands, all wearing vacuum-rated combat suits and grinning like devils. Close quarters, Kincaid muttered, drawing her sidearm. My favorite. A Dominion officer lunged with a vibroblade. She caught the strike with her forearm shield, leaned in close, and whispered, You killed our president. The officer's armor buckled under a pulse shot from her sidearm. Meanwhile, across the solar system, Phase 3 unfolded. The Dominion had always dismissed humans as negotiators, traitors, weak-willed, and compliant. That mistake had cost them more than a flagship. Earth's diplomats, long underestimated, transmitted coordinates, system exploits, and supply vulnerabilities to client worlds under Dominion occupation. You can't fight them alone, one whispered. We can't? Came the reply, calm and deadly. Stop helping them. Rebellions flared like wildfire. The Dominion struggled to maintain cohesion. Supply lines faltered. Communications misfired. Ships abandoned formations to respond to false distress calls and sabotage. Then came the revelation they never expected. President Ward, the man they believed dead, was alive. The Geneva strike had killed a decoy, genetically tailored and surgically perfected. Public enough to fool the Dominion, hidden enough to keep the real Ward safe. He had insisted on it, knowing the martyr could ignite something far more dangerous than fear, unified rage. Ward observed from a stealth vessel beyond Pluto. The battle above Mars, the chaos in Dominion-controlled systems, all visible on his feed. He didn't smile. His eyes were hard, seasoned with grief and fury. They wanted a symbol? He murmured. Give them one they can't forget. He tapped a console. Every human fleet, every autonomous battle group, every planetary rebellion coordinated in silent, deadly synchrony. The Dominion could destroy planets. They could annihilate cities. But humans had been learning their systems, modifying them, understanding the patterns. They knew the weaknesses. They knew the arrogance that came with power. And humans were not afraid. The first Dominion fleet commander to realize it screamed into the comms. Our orders, systems, they're fighting back! From Earth's orbit to the edge of the Kuiper Belt, humanity had turned the Dominion's own empire into a battlefield rigged against them, using subtlety, strategy, and patience as weapons. Kincaid wiped sweat from her brow as the last Dominion boarding party fell. She looked out a viewport at the spinning debris of the Imperious Dawn. Think this ends clean? Her XO asked, voice tight. She shook her head slowly. Nothing about us is clean. Beyond Pluto, Ward's voice echoed softly through secure channels, just enough for the Council to hear. They underestimated us. They thought killing one human would end humanity. They were wrong. A silence fell. But this time, it was not grief. It was anticipation. The storm had only just begun. When Ward reappeared on every Dominion channel, the shock was instantaneous. Across hundreds of systems, eyes widened. The humans they had thought broken were not only standing, they were laughing. "You miss," Ward said, voice calm, cutting through the static. "You executed what you call the decapitation strike. Allow me to clarify a human term, retribution." Veilrun's face flickered across every feed, pale with rage. "You dare!" Ward cut the transmission. Silence. And then, a subtle, almost imperceptible ripple of terror spread through Dominion command networks. Every ship relying on Earth-coded software, every orbital station, every industrial relay, suddenly compromised. Not destroyed. Yet. Just waiting. Humans didn't need brute force. They had something far more devastating: patience and ingenuity. Across the occupied worlds, embedded human operatives activated decades of hidden protocols. Factories ground to a halt. Supply chains fractured. Currency nodes froze. Autonomous weapons systems misfired. Ships designed to exterminate planets suddenly couldn't light a single thruster without risking catastrophic failure. The Dominion fleet scrambled to respond. Officers barked orders, but every action risked turning back on them. Panic, for the first time, replaced confidence. And yet, Ward's attention was elsewhere. He watched rebellion flare on client worlds, once subjugated species rising, armed and inspired. He didn't cheer. Not yet. Humans were never clean, and he knew the costs of victory. In orbit above Ganymede, a Dominion dreadnought prepared to bombard a rebellious colony. Its targeting systems, recalibrated by human engineers years before, betrayed it. The missiles launched inward. The explosion lit the icy moon in fire and shadow. Children watched from surface shelters and laughed. On the Resolute, Kincaid wiped blood from her brow and surveyed the aftermath of hand-to-hand battles along the boarding corridors. Her XO, shaking, asked, "They don't surrender? Ever? Why?" Kincaid smiled faintly. "Because we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting to make them remember." Meanwhile, in the cold darkness beyond Pluto, Ward leaned over his console. The image of the destroyed Imperious Dawn burned in his mind, but his expression was calm. The Dominion had learned a painful lesson. Humans were not predictable, humans were not compliant, humans adapted. And when provoked, humans struck with precision and cruelty reserved for only the most sacred offenses. And the Dominion had committed the ultimate offense. They had killed a human. Ward keyed a secure comm link, voice quiet but lethal. "This isn't war. This is a revelation." The Dominion had underestimated humanity for decades, treating negotiation, science, and civility as weakness. But humans didn't need to annihilate entire fleets to win. They needed patience, cunning, and the willingness to let the enemy believe they were in control, until the moment the noose tightened. A Dominion admiral, staring at her bridge screens in horror, whispered to herself, They're playing us." Ward's lips curved. "Always have." From Earth to the outer colonies, humans moved like a storm with no single center. Autonomous fleets hit weak points. Subverted systems caused chaos in supply chains. Diplomats and spies coordinated rebellion across multiple star systems. It wasn't neat. It wasn't orderly. It wasn't expected. It was devastating. The Dominion's once mighty fleet faltered. Subjugated species began reclaiming their worlds. Economic networks collapsed. Entire fleets sat idle, unsure whether a command was genuine, or part of the human design. And then the final, cruel twist: the Dominion finally realized the president they had assassinated in Geneva was a decoy. Ward had anticipated their strike. He had allowed a symbol to die, knowing the real human leader would emerge stronger, smarter, and more terrifying. The revelation hit Dominion officers like a hammer to the chest. Every strategic assumption, every arrogance-fueled calculation, every sense of superiority evaporated in an instant. Ward's voice echoed across their calms again. You thought killing one man would break us. It united us. You thought fear could control us. It only taught us to strike smarter. You thought your empire was stable. It's not. In quiet, private corners of human command centers, officers and captains allowed themselves a rare smile. The Dominion was learning the price of underestimating humanity. Kincaid checked her weapons, blood and soot smeared across her suit. They'll remember this, she muttered. A railgun outside lit the void. Another Dominion ship imploded. The war was far from over, but humanity had already won the first, most critical battle. They had reminded the galaxy who they were. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of Dominion sensors, Ward watched. Not triumphant. Not vengeful. Just steady, patient, and inexorably human. Because humans were more than soldiers, more than diplomats, more than survivors. They were the storm that arrived quietly, and then tore everything to pieces. And the Dominion, like everyone else, would never forget. The Dominion sued for terms before winter reached Earth. Not surrender, terms. Concessions. Restrictions disguised as diplomacy. Ward met Valeron in orbit above Geneva, where the city's ruins still smoldered like an open wound. The alien ambassador's 6 limbs flexed in tension, ceremonial armor scratched and dented from minor skirmishes in orbit. Valeron's face flickered across the conference feed, rage barely contained. You murdered civilians! It hissed, voice cold but quivering. Ward's jaw tightened. So did you. This conflict destabilizes the quadrant, Valeron said, voice steadier, almost pleading. Good, Ward replied. His eyes drifted to Earth below, scars of fire and rebellion, human cities still breathing, still defiant. That was the point. A silence stretched between them, vast and heavy. Then Valeron spoke, almost reverently. You could annihilate us entirely. Ward nodded once. We could. But we're not you. For the first time, the alien's composure faltered. Valeron's eyes reflected the cities of Earth below, broken but unbowed. Then, why spare us? Ward's gaze hardened. Because humans don't destroy what they can control, they leverage it. He leaned forward, voice low, deliberate. You underestimated us. You thought killing one man would break humanity. Valeron's expression flickered. The weight of that realization crushed any hope of superiority. It unified you? Yes, Ward said softly. And now every corner of your empire knows it. Every fleet, every colony, every puppet world. You cannot touch us without consequence. You cannot strike without risk. You built your empire on fear, and we've turned your fear into our weapon. The final agreement was signed in orbit, Dominion forces stripped from occupied systems, technological oversight embedded permanently, and transparency enforced by human administrators. A leash, cleverly disguised as a partnership. Kincaid's fleet patrolled the orbital corridors, watching Dominion warships obey human-calibrated protocols like trained animals. Each ship's captain had learned a lesson the hard way: never underestimate a species that fights with ingenuity, stubbornness, and the willingness to endure. Back on Earth, veterans toasted quietly in dim mess halls. They toasted the president who died, and returned sharper, smarter, and meaner. They remembered the meteor shower over Geneva, the night the stars themselves had trembled for killing one of theirs. Ward stood before a viewing window aboard his command vessel, looking out at the blue and green planets spinning beneath him. The cost had been high. Cities were scarred. Families lost. But humanity had survived, and the Dominion's arrogance had cracked open for all to see. Valeron, across the feed one last time, asked a question that echoed through the galaxy. What are humans truly? Ward allowed himself a thin, tired smile. We're the storm you only see after it's already torn your house down. And the galaxy learned to fear not the ships, not the weapons, not even the decapitation strikes. They feared humanity itself, clever, relentless, and beautifully, terrifyingly unpredictable. Across the stars, commanders of the Dominion whispered the same dread-filled phrase in every system. They killed Earth's leader. Humanity unleashed hell. And the stars will never forget. The storm had passed, but its shadow stretched across the galaxy, a reminder that some species were never to be underestimated. And humanity? Humanity was just getting started.